Hello everyone, welcome back to another video. So I want to make this video as a sequel to my first video, Jim's Computer, which I'm currently writing. This is at 97,000 views. I'm very thankful for all the support that was shown in the video, as well as the number of theories people have commented on, explaining what they believe happened to Jim, as well as certain story elements. So for this video, I'm going to put these story theories that are similar under one name, and for some smaller yet important theories, we'll call them small theories. So this video, as you saw from the title, is going to be the theories explained. Before we get into starting to explain the theories, I would like to give a small and very quick recap. Jim's Computer takes a course over 5 days, which gets progressively worse for Jim. There are day and night segments, where the day segments reveal more about Jim's world through the newspaper, as well as the segment where you can use the computer. And the night segments are where you have to check the closets to feel safe, but also where the strange events in the game take place. The strange events will be mentioned throughout the theory, so you can understand some of the events that occur. However, if this recap was not enough, and let me tell you, it's very general because I am hoping that most people that have already seen the video have seen videos about Jim's Computer. I strongly suggest watching my video on it. I cover every single day as well, so that way you can get the full context for these theories and even read some that may not be listed here. New theories are being made all the time, so check it out. The info card should drop right about now. So let's get into it. The first theory that was pretty prevalent I got from a lot of people is schizo theory. This theory is mainly saying that at some point in Jim's life, Jim began to suffer from schizophrenia, a symptom of which is paranoia. What we see is an episode of Jim's where everything he sees is a threat. He begins to blow things out of proportion, as by looking at the news, what could be a simple rise in crime or maybe just a disappearance seems to be an end of days for him. The man with no name is actually either a friend to Jim or his neighbor, who Jim interprets as someone who wishes him to stay safe to the horrors that Jim believes are coming. Jim either hallucinates or sees a helicopter, which he thinks is a military helicopter, which on day 5 would declare or be part of the declaration of martial law in Robloxia. What happens on the left in the last days that the National Guard or the military does end up getting involved to be tougher on crime, but it is not a declaration of martial law. Jim's fears lead him to constantly check the news for new information and checking his closets to get updated and feel safe. The door opening was either due to the door being weak and opening or for some other reason or hallucination. Jim boards up his house and a concerned neighbor sees this, who ends up knocking on the door. Jim can't take it anymore and he'd rather die than face the fear. For this theory, and at least generally schizo theory, credit goes to Lindsay Sabini for the main groundwork for the story, Noam Noensen and SpiderX4000 for presenting the theory, Limbo Sona for talking about the theory, and many more comments that talk about it. This theory helps to explain who the mysterious stranger is, as well as what's happening with Jim and his condition. It adds a bit of a sad ending, given that it would simply imply that none of what is actually occurring is exactly real, or that it is being misconstrued by Jim's own mind, but rather is also a symptom of his condition. It is also a bit sadder, given that everyone that interacts with Jim, including the person knocking on the door at the end, could be implied that they're just concerned for Jim or trying to help him in some way. Though there are some general questions such as the disappearances and generally the crime itself, why the military helicopter would be seen, why the news would bring up stuff like the serial disappearances on 5 days. One could assume that it could be delusions, but one of the problems with this is that it is also very similar to the next theory, which is PTSD theory, which some people detailed that basically Jim is either a war veteran of some sort or just has developed PTSD from a general traumatic event, which once again does detail that what is occurring is paranoia, but that Jim struggles with PTSD, and that can sometimes cause him to hallucinate. For both, coming from a guy who is not a medical health professional, the most defining part would be that they're really hallucinations. With the exception of maybe the door opening and some of the news, like the constant string of, hey, there's disappearances in Robloxia, or hey, the oil spill happened. Whether or not those are actually real, or what you would count as a delusion, or what would count as reality or misconstruction, is generally up to you. But once again, this is coming from someone who doesn't really know much about mental health and its effects. What I do know is that schizophrenia and PTSD, and as well as OCD, which is another condition that was mentioned, do create paranoia, as well as a bunch of other health conditions. As paranoia is not exactly something that is a standalone condition, it is rather a symptom, or typically a symptom, for health conditions like PTSD or schizophrenia. Because all of this, I will leave this theory as a plausible theory for what occurs in Jim's computer. For the next theory though, it does have something to do with the oil spill. More specifically, what was in it. For the next theory is the chemical theory, which details that the oil spill led to chemicals being the cause for the disappearances, as it messes with people's heads, causing paranoia and hallucinations for many. This also comes to affect Jim, who also succumbs to the chemicals' effects, and, well, you know. The theory was given a little more depth that the people disappearing may be from both the people's choice to, as well as corruption with the mayor making them disappear, kind of hiding the evidence that the oil spill had something to do with it. Basically, it's a cover-up theory, or it utilizes portions of cover-up theory, but it does actually have a scientific explanation as to what is occurring, rather than being a little different in the sense of it being supernatural or something completely different, which we'll get into later. For this theory, it does suffer from some issues that cover-up theory did have. One issue with this is the theory of paranoia, like how paranoia is a symptom of medical conditions and not a standalone condition. This is an issue as the oil spill itself cannot cause it, meaning that what we may be seeing isn't paranoia but likely other conditions. As for the chemicals, Ocarina Girl and the stories, the person who presented this theory, did mention that carbon dioxide poisoning can cause you to hallucinate, which then has the issue of explaining where Jim is and the proximity between him and the town of Robloxia, as well as whether or not the mayor has it too, whether the soldiers would also now be poisoned, how people would not have known, and likely would have been noticed given that carbon dioxide can condense or create fog. This theory does have some grounds, and actually others added onto it on my Discord server, which you should join by the way, as members Barry B and Cappy actually theorized that the oil spill led to a wildfire on the 5th day, which is why the sky is red, and if it was visible from Jim's house, it could have led him to hallucinate, which could have been due to the carbon dioxide poisoning. It also could be that Jim was already having mental issues previous to this, which would be similar or would take parts of schizo and PTSD theory, as well as likely having paranoia from that and was afraid that some disappearances in Robloxia would mean that he was next. They also noted that Jim is a very lonely person and that he may have bought food and toys to entertain himself with day by day, but at some point it began to wear on him. Regardless, it is a plausible theory and it could go well with schizo and PTSD theory, as both of them can explain the events well. And that's kind of one of the big things before we continue, that these theories can typically or will typically connect with one another, so just watch out for that. The next one is a bit of a reference for people who may know this. The next theory is Mandela Catalog theory, which people such as Ecliptic Bagel, Average Glagler, I can't say that name, Suri081, and Crunchio, and many more actually did mention. If you don't know what Mandela's Catalog is, you and I are on the same boat. But coming from my limited knowledge, it is an analog horror web series that takes place in a fictional county named Mandela County. The lore is massive and spans, I think, 3 seasons and is also in development as we are speaking, so I'm not going to get into it that much. What I will say, though, is that the main antagonists are these demons called alternates who kill their victims and then become them. What this theory explains is that the people disappearing are victims of alternates and that Jim was next on the list. The knocking on the door seems to be a reference to Mark Heathcliff, a character in one of the videos of the series, who is someone we see locked in a room with the door closed as an alternate attempts to kill him. It tries to mentally weaken him and wants him to open the door, with Mark doing what Jim does at the end of the game. This was a popular theory, and apparently Mandela Catalog was an inspiration and is deliberately referenced for this game. The theory may be would be better explained by veteran watchers of Mandela's catalog who may understand everything that's happening. So I'm sorry if my ignorance does kind of get in the way or may not allow me to fully go into depth as to what this theory foretold. However, I would like to also mention that there are just some odd occurrences with it. Maybe someone can answer this one. With the biggest oddity is why have mass disappearances? Like I stated, I may be misinformed, but aren't those really bad for alternates, as it essentially exposes them to the people in the county that they are alternates? And the second is that the oil spill would essentially be a red herring in the game, or would be a distraction, which would make sense given that it is only mentioned on the first day when we hear its opening, and on the fourth day where it's mentioned that it had an oil spill. With the mayor denying connections between the disappearances and the spill, and briefly on the fifth day where it's mentioned. It's also weird whether or not the mayor also is an alternate or not, which would make no sense considering that he would be declaring martial law and bringing in soldiers who are armed. Though then again, I don't really know what the lore is for Mandela's catalog, so once again, I could be misinformed on that one. It is a very interesting theory, and like schizo theory, I think it is able to explain what occurs very well within the game. However, whilst these were the big three, there were a ton of smaller theories, well, smaller story theories, that I would like to mention briefly before we move on to the little observation theories. So let's get into a lightning round. The first one is it's a simulation theory, basically dream theory. Shadow theory, shadows come for Jim. I have no mouth and I must scream theory. In the book, which, yes, this is a book, Pam keeps 5 people alive, torturing them. Basically, the creator keeps Jim alive, torturing him until, like in the book, he is able to die, that being Jim. Jim dies and finds peace. That's the only way I could really reference I have no mouth and I must scream, or even name this theory. And the last one is prank theory, which is Jim was pranked by several teens, then they take it too far with attempting to break in, and it scares Jim out a lot, considering that he may have had paranoia previously. Once again, this one kind of ties into schizo theory, taking bits of it, saying that, oh, he was probably already having some mental conditions, or mental, not to mention that the oil spill and disappearances may not have helped, so Jim ends up being pranked, but it was taken to an extreme degree as Jim gets extremely paranoid, and you know what happens at the end of the game. The final theory, which I thought was the most pretty wildest one, was sacred Indian burial site theory. This was mentioned by like one person, and I thought it was very interesting. But the drilling, I'm going to assume that it was either the drilling of the oil, what is it called? The oil refinery, or either Jim's home was home to a sacred Indian burial site, which in media is often shown to be cursed, as I believe the Indians or Native Americans or Native Indians, Native Americans decided to curse the lands before they left when they were kicked out, which leads to the events of the game. Those are most of the theories I saw in the comments. The last one's a little out there, but it's plausible. Why not? And others are deviations of these theories, with the big three being the most prevalent ones seen. However, there are some additional theories for some smaller parts of the story, not explaining the whole story overall, but just providing smaller details or smaller theories on things that were part of the story. So the first one is that on night 2, this is more of an observation, is that if you actually approach the door and you just listen in real close, you can actually hear some faint scratching outside. However, this helps any of them, except maybe prank theory, which it's not really human. Someone even said that it really wasn't human to scratch the wall or the door, which is also odd given that Jim does state that he feels safe on the second day, which, if this is what was occurring, then he was not even safe on the second day. And it's likely that either Jim just didn't hear it, like the player, as it's something that could be easily ignored, or that Jim does hear it and just lies to himself and just hopes for the best. Another observation is actually the sky on the 5th day, which previously mentioned was the wildfire theory. And there are some theories for this additionally to the wildfire theory. One was that Jim actually stayed up until sunset, or that the oil spill did lead to a wildfire, which creates an orange sky due to the ash and smoke. A theory for who was knocking at the door was also pretty big, Most are accompanied by the other story theories, but people stated that it could have been a delusion, that it could have been a concerned neighbor or friend, that it could have been the military, that it was an alternate, that it was just another monster, and so much more. There's a lot of theories on this one, so if you ever want to go down into the comments and check those out, you can definitely find them pretty quick. The last small theory that I wanted to talk about was the mysterious stranger. Someone mentioned that there are 7 dashes on his name, which are the same as the 3 dashes for the gun. The 3 dashes obviously spell gun, G-U-N. But using this dash system, the stranger actually made a name for the 7 letters. They ended up theorizing that it actually could have meant nothing. And someone else mentioned it could have been monster, or the monster messing with Jim. Both change the intentions of who the stranger is, as some theories pose that it is a friend or a concerned neighbor, or that maybe just be checking on Jim. But additionally, these 2 theories may bring up this point that whoever was talking to him was either not real, hence the nothing part, which would bring into question Jim's mental state and sanity, or that it was the monster attempting to worsen his own mental state, which obviously would be with malicious intent, which would go against some of these theories where the person, the mysterious stranger, is often seen as more of a positive or kind of good guy in the story. Well, that's all the theories for today. These are mainly the big ones that I mentioned or that I saw, and I want to thank everyone who commented on the video, and it was pretty cool to see it blow up and be the spark of this channel. Once again, I would like to reiterate, this is not all the theories that were mentioned. Even some schizo theories and even PTSD theories have deviations as to what actually happens to Jim. So I suggest checking those out if you want to. The link will be in the description for this video, as well as likely on one of the info cards, which you may have seen at the beginning of the video. So, how about you go check that video out, and, you know, if you want to share your theories as well, share them. But yeah, that's about it